North Sea lifting. Communicating safety in association with OIS International Inspection, SCOTA, the Scottish Offshore Training Association, Offshore Crane Engineering, Sparrows Offshore, Waterweights, and Caledonia Training Consultancy. One of the best things about having a full-time job is that you really appreciate the time off when it comes, and the chance to do the things you enjoy doing. Whatever it is, golf, shooting, fishing, model making, restoring old cars, or playing a musical instrument, you need your hands and fingers. So the last thing you want is to injure them in any way. In every job, but drilling operations are potentially hazardous because of the nature of the work and the heavy equipment that's involved. And if you're working on an offshore rig, there are extra problems caused by the rig moving about. There are plenty of pinch points where hands and fingers can be trapped. Of course, there are safe procedures that have been developed, but there's always the temptation to take shortcuts, and although you might get away with it often enough, sooner or later you won't, and you'll become another statistic, another lost time injury. Let's follow Andy Mackenzie around the rig and take a look at some of the commonest causes of accidents and see how they can be eliminated. In fact, it's not just accidents that you need to worry about. There are many different chemicals used in drilling operations, and exposure to these can set up skin irritations or infections. Oil and grease can also cause dermatitis. So before you start any job, you should always apply a barrier cream. If you're involved in work with corrosive chemicals like caustic soda, for example, then there'll be heavy-duty rubber gloves for you to use. So take the time to get them and wear them. And make sure you wear them properly, not like this. Get the sleeves of your coverall down into the cuffs of the gloves so that you get protection. Don't think you can use the ordinary polka dot gloves or rigger's gloves. They're no protection against the corrosive chemical. Use the right ones. For specialized jobs, there are other types of glove. Heavy-duty leather for welding, or dielectric gloves for electricians. Inevitably, your hands are going to get dirty. Don't be tempted to use any chemicals, for example, industrial cleaning fluid, paint thinner, or petroleum spirit to get the dirt off. They'll cause serious long-term skin problems. There are the right cleaners at strategic points around the workplace, so just use them. Of course, you're going to be wearing the basic personal protective equipment: hard hat, safety boots, safety glasses, gloves, and coveralls. But always make sure that your coveralls are neat and tidy, with no torn flaps that can get caught up in machinery. You're really asking for trouble with flapping shirt cuffs or folded up sleeves on your coveralls. And there's another point. No matter how much you're attached to it, you mustn't wear any jewelry while you're working, especially rings or bracelets. In fact, this is so dangerous that company policy forbids it. A ring can easily catch on moving machinery, and your finger can be torn off before you can do anything about it. If your finger gets crushed, a ring will get crushed as well, driving into your finger and constricting the tissue so that often amputation is the only option. A bracelet snagged on a machine can drag your whole hand and arm into it, with obvious consequences. Finally, before you start work, check your tools to make sure they're not worn or have burrs or other sharp snags that might catch your hands. Now you're ready to start. But remember, a drill floor is not the friendliest place to work in. You've got to keep your wits about you all the time. And remember, you have a responsibility to look out for your mates as well. Let's look at some of the commonest ways that people can, and sadly do, get hurt. When you're clamping manual tongs, don't just get hold of any part of them to get extra leverage. There are the proper handles, so use them and keep your thumbs tucked in out of the way. When metal surfaces come up against flesh and bone, there's no contest. Moving heavy equipment around gives plenty of chances to get your hands and fingers trapped, especially if you're trying to speed things up and cut corners. For example, maneuvering elevator links or lifting bales out through the V-door can be speeded up by choking a sling around the middle of the link like this, so that the link can swing around. Accidents happen when you try to steady it or push it through the door. The right way is to thread a sling through one of the eyes and attach it to the main lifting winch. Then you can thread a second sling through the other eye, attach that to another winch, usually on the catwalk, and use that to pull it through the door. There are winches in specific places to carry out specific tasks. Moving equipment from its storage position to the workplace, for example. If you try to use another winch, you'll probably end up pushing the equipment further from the vertical, so that there's a greater chance of it swinging out of control, hitting someone in the process. And while we're on winches, never try to guide the wire onto the drum with your hands. You could end up with friction burns. A broken piece of wire could snag and cut you. And at worst, it could pull your hand and arm onto the drum. It's such a dangerous thing to do that it's hard to believe that anyone would. But they do. The statistics are there. Machinery has to be maintained, of course, but before starting any work on a machine, you must make sure it's properly isolated. Just switching it off isn't enough. Someone else could come along and switch it on with your hands still inside, so that you might be electrocuted or lose some fingers as it restarts. You must always get the isolation permit along with the work permit, and the isolation must be performed by a competent person. As an additional safety measure, you must always display the permit prominently, so that someone else can see that the machinery is under repair. When you're working on equipment, take the time to get a spanner or a wrench that's the right size and isn't worn. If it slips off when you're putting maximum pressure on it, you can easily get a bad cut or even a broken knuckle. If you're using an air wrench, remember that they can generate tremendous torque. And if you're caught out, you can easily end up with a sprained or broken wrist. Some jobs are awkward because you're tight for space and because the various parts are heavy. Changing outliners on the mud pumps, for example, is a difficult job. Don't find out the hard way that it's too difficult. Get some help. And if there are mechanical lifting aids, a chain hoist or a lever hoist, then again, take the time to use them. On the pipe deck, it's a common practice when slinging tubulars to hold onto the rigging until the crane takes the slack. You should try not to do this, but if you have to, be very careful to make sure that your hands or fingers don't end up trapped between the slings and the load. It could happen so easily if you get distracted or your mind's away somewhere else. So take care. When you're racking drill pipe, you're going to be fully aware of the risks to your hands. But don't forget your feet. If the string lands early, your toes and feet could get crushed. take a look at these accidents again. They're the kind of thing that happen all too often, and yet they're all so easy to avoid. Just a little more thought, a little more care, by being aware all the time of what's going on. Just think what a hand injury would mean to you. For a start, it'll be very painful. There are all kinds of things you won't be able to do for yourself. There may be loss of earnings, and depending upon the severity of the injury, it may be with you for the rest of your life. On this occasion, Andy's getting a second chance. But in the real world, you won't. One of your main lines of defense is the Safety Training Observation Program. Stop. Think about how you've done a job in the past. Think about how you're going to do it now. And then think about how it should be done to do it safely. Always be prepared to question. What could happen during the job? What injuries might be sustained if something did go wrong? And how could they be avoided? Don't think, it couldn't happen to me. It happens to thousands of people in all kinds of jobs every year. And it's people's behavior that makes the workplace safe. People like you. North Sea Listings offers a complete range of safety awareness packages. For further information, please contact